Hello, and welcome to today's episode of Text Appeal Lessons on the Body, Mind, and Beyond. Today, I will be talking about genetics, evolution, and the human capacity for what we call rationality. This one focuses on scientific perspectives, but also touches on morality and belief in God. It is a goal of mine to provide a safe place for evolutionists and creationists alike. Yes, I understand how difficult this will be, but if I can get even one person who struggles with a belief in God or maybe a skepticism of science to become a little bit more knowledgeable about both, then I have achieved what I have set out to do. In the first episode, I made the observation that people go to war over ideas, and I have also explained that people can become very attached to their possessions. Well, ideas are another kind of possession that people clutch very closely to their heart. This is especially the case when someone aligns their ideas and beliefs with their identity. Having an identity is a basic part of human development, and I first want to talk a little bit about the process of identity formation as well as how that relates to one's particular beliefs. Identity is the set of traits and qualities about an individual that allows them to be distinguished from others. Identity is going to emerge around the same time that a child becomes aware of their sense of self and their own existence. This intuition about who they are will often form in comparison to others relative to their circumstance. I am specifically saying sense of self because upon learning about some pretty fascinating ideas that are circulating in the neuroscientific space, it actually appears that the self is an illusion. Sam Harris would even go as far to say that the sense of self is an illusion, and world renowned professor of biology, neurology, and neurosurgery, Robert Sapolsky, seconds this radical opinion. Although, admittedly, to tell people that the sense of self is an illusion is sort of bizarre, that in no way alone diminishes the validity and accuracy of the claim. More on this in the future, as there will be episodes dedicated to everything that Sam Harris and Robert Sapolsky have taught me. For now, we can live with our current understanding of the sense of self for the sake of this episode. When someone calls a little kid smart their whole life, and the kid also excels on certain tests throughout his or her childhood in comparison to their peers, they may begin to adopt being smart as part of their identity. This goes for just about every aspect of identity, and even people who will swear to you that they are different than the masses or that they don't compare themselves to other people are inescapably a part of this game. The reason for this is because even if somebody lived in a cave, off the grid and away from society, their unique sense of self is still going to be found in comparison with others, or that lack of others, and will be defined by how radically different they are from everyone else. You can nitpick this example all you want, but to no end, because the large majority of us all do not live in such caves and have already long been integrated into the system of society itself. Our identities are formed for good reason, as we obviously want to distinguish ourselves from one another so that we may treat individuals differently based on their conduct. Identity is also largely related to the many social roles a person plays, and my different social roles that come to mind are brother, son, athlete, student, human, male, friend, and countless others. Now, we also have beliefs, and it is often the case that we identify with beliefs to the point that we may end up actually fighting for them, and the fight can become verbal or escalate into violence. This is not necessarily bad, because if someone with very destructive and poisonous beliefs comes into contact with us and the people we love, well, then maybe a fight is the right thing to engage in. Your identity is punished or rewarded, as discussed in a previous episode, and it is crucial to realize that the way in which you have come to believe certain things about the world is determined by your exposure to certain ideas, as well as how those beliefs are received by the social community. The particular types of belief I want to talk about today, in which people hold near and dear to their heart, revolves around the question, how did we get here? Yes, the big question. What chain of events transpired so that we humans can roam the planet today, and when did it happen? There are an absurd number of answers given, but today I will be exploring the theory of evolution as a more logic based explanation for existence. Some would argue that belief in scientific theories require just as much faith as believing in a creation based model. But I find this to be quite hard to follow, because belief in something on insufficient evidence is generally called delusion, yet an unwavering attachment to something logical can also be terribly destructive. Allow me to develop a juxtaposition between faith and rationality over the next handful of episodes. This channel is all about the intersection between neuroscience and philosophy. Health, values, and science are the most important aspects of my life and my identity, and I really just hope to spread as much information as I can regarding these topics in hopes that people can use this information to improve their well being. Also, if you believe in creation, I challenge you to get through this episode, as the next one will be dedicated to the reasons why rationality can lead us astray, where I will explore the concept of faith and belief in God. For now, these are all the reasons why evolution is a pretty good explanation for how we all got here. More on its limits later. Towards the end of this episode, I will also talk about a couple of scriptures that are really powerful. So, if you're one of the people who believe in creation and want a little bit of commentary on some biblical scripture to, wash the sins away of all this evolution talk, well, then stick around. This next section will be an explanation of the theory of evolution as it is understood in academia. As an undergraduate psychology major going into my fourth year, I have taken classes that lay out the theory of evolution, such as Introductory Biology 101, as well as Brain and Behavior 245. These low-level classes provide a rudimentary understanding of what evolution is, and my more nuanced understanding of the theory comes from reading books such as Behave by Robert Sapolsky, Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari, Descartes' Error by Antonio Damasio, as well as watching plenty of college-level lectures revolving around evolutionary psychology. If you have already listened to episode 2, then you remember that in biology, we categorize different life forms into taxonomical ranking systems that allow us to conceptualize the differences between animals, plants, fungi, and bacteria. There are many uses to this system, and the rules for classification are pretty brilliant as far as I'm concerned. For example, at the very broadest level of classification, we have the domain of a life form. The three domains include archaea, bacteria, and eukarya. Archaea are microorganisms similar to bacteria, but they are often found in extreme environments such as hot springs, salt lakes, and deep sea hydrothermal vents. I don't know a lot about archaea, but I still figure I should mention it. Bacteria are prokaryotic microorganisms characterized by the absence of a nucleus and other membrane bound organelles. Bacteria are incredibly diverse and can be found in virtually every habitat on Earth, including soil, water, and oftentimes inside of other organisms. Lastly, we have eukarya. This domain includes all eukaryotic organisms, which have cells with a true nucleus and other membrane-bound organelles, such as the mitochondria. The eukarya domain encompasses a wide variety of life forms, including animals, plants, and fungi. The primary distinction between eukaryotes and prokaryotes is the presence of a true nucleus and membrane-bound organelles in eukaryotic cells, as I just said. We as animals are eukaryotes, meaning our cells contain a nucleus and are generally more complex. Next, we have six different kingdoms of life, which include archaea, bacteria, protista, fungi such as mushrooms, plantae like flowers, and animalia like us. So, as you can see, this system organizes life into different ranks so that we can better conceptualize what we mean by life itself. Another aspect of biology that is fundamental in understanding the theory of evolution and biology is the concept of phylogeny. Phylogeny is the evolutionary history and relationships among individuals or groups of organisms. These relationships are discovered through various forms of data analysis, like looking at DNA sequences, physical structures of organisms, and the functionality of these structures in comparison to other organisms. Phylogeny aims to understand how species or other groups have diverged and evolved from common ancestors over time. A phylogenetic tree is like a family tree that helps us understand how life forms came to be and how they developed various traits over time. A basic phylogenetic tree of Homo sapiens is as follows. Mind you, this is complicated, but so is life, so understanding this theory is vitally important in knowing what you are biologically. Starting from the earliest primates, it divides into prosimians and anthropoids, with anthropoids further branching into New World monkeys, Old World monkeys, and apes. From the apes, the tree narrows down to great apes, then African apes, leading to the hominins, and finally to the genus Homo, which includes us, the Homo sapien. This phylogenetic tree explains the undeniable similarities between the brains and genetics of modern humans and various other primate species. So, how in the hell could we possibly be the descendants of other hominin creatures, great apes, and even the earliest of primates? Well, this is where the idea of speciation comes into play. You see, the organism and the environment have a complex relationship. The environment is dynamic, meaning it is always changing, and the organism must in return respond. This response can be met by an individual organism by the way of biological regulation, but the way in which speciation occurs is painfully slow, and so much death has to occur for this process to take place. In basic terms, just take food sources, for example. Let's imagine we are an early primate looking for fruit to eat. Well, for us to even be alive, that means our ancestors had to successfully reproduce, meaning they survived past puberty, attracted a mate, and managed to stay alive whilst undergoing all of this struggle in the jungle. Wouldn't it be advantageous that our ancestors, the ones who successfully survived, developed color vision so that they may detect ripe fruit more easily in the wild? Have you really ever considered why you have color vision and a lot of other animals don't? Well, these explanations provide answers because apparently genetic mutations over extremely long periods of time help develop color vision in primates like ourselves. This genetic mutation is going to serve the organism well, meaning our primate ancestors who descend from unlucky parents who did not inherit the genes responsible for color vision had a harder time finding food, and eventually, the only survivors were those who had this new device for detecting color instantiated in their DNA. This is not every detail and exactly how this works to a T, but the approximation is close enough because I just want you to understand how tiny the genetic variation is from generation to generation. But with incomprehensibly long periods of time comes incomprehensibly complex changes to the organism. With enough variation, we see brand new species emerge, and this is speciation. The technical definition of evolution, as I learned this year in Biology 101, can help you understand this process a little bit better. Evolution is the change of allele frequency over time. An allele is a variant form of a gene. Genes are segments of DNA located on chromosomes that code for specific proteins, which in turn influence various traits and characteristics in an organism. Each gene can have different versions or alleles, which may result in different expressions of a particular trait. So, as I have said before, natural selection is the process by which nature selects certain organisms over others to survive based on how fit that organism is relative to its given environment. Over time, different alleles are expressed, meaning different traits are going to become manifest in the organism, thus creating variation. Enough variation equals speciation, and over ridiculous periods of time, millions of different organisms have emerged out of this process. This is phylogeny. You might have a problem with grasping how it is possible that organisms have been around that long, and I think the explanation is fairly simple. We humans only live about 100 years if we are lucky, and that's accounting for modern medicine. So our conception of time is psychologically bound to this relatively tiny scale. Also, we should recognize that the emergence of self awareness that humans have directly relates to our understanding of mortality itself. And many modern sciences and technology are developed in the name of longevity and the survival of humanity in general. Why are we so concerned with climate change? Well, because we understand that we may have bitten off more than we can chew in terms of how our technology influences the natural state of the earth. Nature has these checks and balances wired right into its system. After reading the book Sapiens, I was blown away by the realization that humanity has transcended these checks and balances in quite a terrifying way. You see, the lion is a ferocious hunter, and his body and mind are designed to effectively stalk, kill, and consume prey animals such as the gazelle. Upon further investigation, you may realize that as the lion developed sharper teeth and more efficient strategies for hunting the gazelle developed faster legs and better strategies to flee its stalker. The populations of these creatures balance out as the best lions continue to survive and reproduce, and then the best gazelles successfully escape becoming lunch enough times so that the survivors on both sides continue to propagate into future generations. What I mean is that the genes themselves propagate into future generations. This process of checks and balances could have maintained a certain level of homeostasis for literally hundreds of millions of years. Humans are a little different, though, because our abilities such as language, reading, writing, drawing, and being able to invent technology puts us at a huge advantage in the animal kingdom. Whether it was God or random chance that allowed humans to acquire such capabilities is up for debate. But nobody can deny that we are in serious danger of building weapons of mass destruction that can be very much thought of in biblical terms. Maybe God had to step in and provide the flood so that man did not destroy his wonderful creations, those being earth and life. Maybe those stories tell us a lot more about the human tendency to fly too close to the sun. Maybe we are once again building towers of Babel, and God will soon enough make us speak many languages so as not to destroy his creation once more. We are always trying to find alternative ways to paradise itself, and as far as I'm concerned, a utopian vision for the future is very flawed. Maybe political division, war, and conflict are the result of our speaking different languages in the first place. Maybe, just maybe, these checks and balances that God, or the universe for you total secularists, are the mechanisms by which we stand a chance at surviving any further. You see, it is my aim to reconcile biblical wisdom with contemporary neuroscience as I continue to develop my own philosophy and worldview. Evolution is complicated, but upon learning the theory as it currently stands, it is quite logical, plausible, and I have no problem accepting this scientific explanation for how we got here, at least to a point where the theory can no longer answer deeper and deeper questions on the issue. The common argument against God is that evolution is not a teleological process. Episode 4 talks about teleology a little bit, but I will review here as well. A great example of this word being used in a sentence I found online is: the teleological argument for the existence of God posits that the complexity and order in the universe are best explained by the presence of an intelligent designer. Teleological is an adjective that describes anything related to teleology, which is the philosophical study of purpose or design in natural phenomena. In a teleological approach, processes and entities are explained by their end goals or purposes rather than by their causes alone. Now, in my adolescent and adult development class, Dr. Ellison informed me that there is really no scientific evidence that evolution is in fact teleological. You see, the emergence of our prefrontal cortex and the experience of the mind itself seems quite miraculous, and we humans intuitively infer an intelligent design behind this process. It is pretty evident that humans tend to think very egocentrically, meaning we see the world from our own perspective, and we often interpret things based on our own experience. Jean Piaget, a legendary developmental psychologist, even identified that children are extremely egocentric in their thinking. This egocentrism can lead them to create explanations and stories that reflect their own experiences and understanding. Is it totally insane for me to argue that maybe in humanity's infancy or childhood, we had quite an egocentric pattern of thinking, and creation stories themselves are the product of this projection? Evolutionary psychology would argue that the reason you even apply meaning to ideas and objects is in the name of survival itself. And as previously elaborated upon, we are wired to avoid threats and to cling to what works for our own lives. Having a strong belief in a creator may very well be the projection of something inherently human, because we are intelligent designers. And when you look at your own hands, you might wonder, well, what created me? I am absolutely obsessed with this question, and I want to clarify that my curiosity leads me down many rabbit holes explaining our creation. But so far, evolutionary theory is the most compelling when considering my own capacity for rational thinking and logical explanations. On the flip side, before I ever read neuroscience or took a biology class, I was and am still very hesitant to say that God doesn't exist or couldn't exist. The truth is, I don't know how a moral God could make sense, but that's just the point. Science and evolution provide rational explanations, and even more accurately, they provide rational approximations, because at the end of the day, a theory stands until it's debunked. But what about the downsides of our logic and our tendency to cling to any type of belief, where we can believe things that are totally incorrect on a daily basis? The next episode will focus on a more creationistic perspective, and I aim to criticize rationality in the name of faith. So if you are more of a religious thinker, I applaud you if you made it this far, because these ideas are really difficult to digest, especially when the Bible is your foundational text for understanding the universe. I have no fear in exploring many ideas because I have studied the Bible, and the wisdom in there has helped me grow the courage to ask myself the hardest of questions. Scripture planted a vision inside of me, and I once upon a time asked God, "What is my purpose?" That question has led me to seek answers. Consider the following. This is Jeremiah 29:11 from the New International Version. "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." This verse is often quoted to emphasize the idea that God has a specific plan for each individual's life. It conveys the assurance that God's intentions are positive and aimed at bringing about prosperity, hope, and a promising future for those who trust in Him. I trusted in Him, and He led me to an academic journey where I have found a deep passion for neuroscience. The problem is that in order to study neuroscience in 2024, you can't realistically accept biblical dogma as the best explanation for what a human brain is. I am an ambiguous creature, an ambivalent one, even, torn between biblical wisdom and contemporary biology. What do I do with this conundrum? Well, I ask God to protect me on my journey, because if He is there, He surely knows my heart, and I can only pray for protection as I encounter and adopt ideas that are traditionally blasphemous. Join me as I fearlessly explore the biggest questions that humanity has ever asked, armed with a shield crafted by the wisdom of ancient texts and a sword produced by the materials of modern science. Always remember that there is a rhyme and reason to just about every aspect of your being, and my life will be dedicated to consuming, digesting, and redistributing information about the human experience in the hopes that even one person is transformed by my work for the better. I deeply appreciate each and every listener. So thank you for listening to another episode of Text Appeal, Lessons on the Body, Mind, and Beyond.